The New Orleans Pelicans this year were projected by, I'd say, most people to be a pretty good middle-of-the-pack playoff team, somewhere around the 6th seed, that kind of ballpark. Well, the Pelicans are currently the 1st seed in the Western Conference, and they have both a top 5 offense and, shockingly, a top 5 defense. So, the conversation has gone beyond just, is this team good? And now the conversation is this team a contender? Let's talk about it. Before I continue on with this video, if you end up enjoying it, then please be sure to subscribe. I'm trying to upload daily in December. Also drop a like, it really helps the video do better in the YouTube algorithm, and it takes you 1 second to do it. I'm looking at you right now, just click it, it's not that hard. Anyways, I think the best way to open up this breakdown would be by looking at the most surprising aspect of this team's success, which has been their success on the defensive end of the floor. The Pelicans are currently ranked 3rd in defense, which puts them just 2 points behind the Milwaukee Bucks and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are both on pace to be some all-time great defenses. Honestly, if there weren't 2 other all-time great defenses in the league right now, the Pelicans would be the best defense in the NBA, which frankly is extremely shocking given what was expected of them going into this year. Back when people were speculating on what this team was going to look like going into the year, most people would have said that yes, this is going to be a great offensive team because they have so many scoring weapons, but they're going to have to score so much to make up for bad defense. That's certainly what I thought. CJ McCollum is a pretty weak defender. Brandon Ingram is fine. He shows flashes of being good, but on the average day is just okay. Zion can be fine, but is usually rather disappointing on that end. Valanciunas is good enough at being a big body, but he has concrete in his shoes, so he can't defend the perimeter worth crap. And yeah, there were defenders like Herb Jones and Jose Alvarado, but that wouldn't be enough to carry their defense. But again, 3rd in defensive rating. So that evaluation that seemed damn near universal, not so accurate. So how exactly has this been accomplished? What have they done to exceed their expectations defensively dramatically? Well, I would really chalk it up to 2 factors. The first one being the head coaching of Willie Green. The Pels have a very clear and deliberate defensive game plan, and that is really more important than I think it is often given credit for. They are very, very switch heavy, and they focus specifically on forcing turnovers and playing passing lane. They are currently 2nd in steals per game in the league and 6th in opponent turnovers. If you're going to play the Pelicans, you're going to find it a little hard to take care of the ball, and that also translates to the offensive end of things where they're able to get out on the fast break. But pestering them and just being everywhere, switching and being all over the floor, it seems. It's almost chaotic how the Pelicans play defense. That type of scheme from the head coach can more than make up for otherwise not having particularly special defensive personnel, because if you have all 5 players in sync, all 5 players know where they need to be, know what they need to do, and you consistently see that that communication is there, that opens up the opportunity to be a fantastic defense, even if individually none of those 5 guys are great. But then you add on to it the fact that the Pelicans actually do have a couple of great defenders and a couple of defenders who have exceeded expectations. CJ McCollum is having the best defensive season of his career. Zion Williamson, who has vastly disappointed defensively based on expectations entering the league, he has exceeded that poor reputation. And guys like Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, and Trey Murphy, who were all not expected to be huge contributors this year, have all been huge contributors this year on both ends of the floor, but especially as plus defenders. And with Herb Jones and Jose Alvarado both being elite defenders, add that into a really good defensive system and you come out with a good defense. There's really only 2 elite-ish defenders on this team, and one of them is 6 feet tall, so even then how much impact is that player really capable of having? But it just simply doesn't matter because of how they play as a team. I also should throw out that Larry Nance Jr. is a pretty damn good defender too, so him as well. Good Lord, I'm just realizing how deep this Pelicans team is too. Like, that's so many good players that they have. But now let's talk about the less surprising thing, which is the offensive end of the floor. And really, to talk about how they've been more successful lately, the #1 catalyst in that has to have been Zion Williamson. So let's talk about how he's been playing. Over the last 7 games, Zion is averaging a ridiculous 31 points on 71% true shooting percentage. He has been relentless going to the rim, which has resulted in multiple free throw attempts per game, and he's just been pretty much the vision of what we expected Zion to be entering the league. Really, he's the closest thing we have to basically like if Shaq was more perimeter oriented. Like, he's just simply unstoppable at the basket. Either you're going to give him a layup or a dunk, or you're going to foul him, and his free throw percentage has been steadily increasing throughout his career to the point where him going to the line is not a net negative. Not that it ever was quite a negative, but like he's at like 75% from the line now, which is pretty good, and he's getting 10 attempts a game there. Another huge facet in this has been playmaking. Zion is averaging 5 assists over this same 7-game stretch, and they have clearly made more and more of an effort to utilize Zion as a playmaker. I believe it even said recently, I think in the MVP discussion video, that Zion is gonna be someone who could average 7 assists per game. It's really just a matter of whether or not the Pelicans embrace that aspect of his game, and it seems like they're embracing it right now, especially as they've been dealing with players in and out of lineups, and CJ McCollum being kind of disappointing on the offensive end, but we'll get to that more in a second. Next, we have to talk about Brandon Ingram. He's someone who's been in and out of lineups, but when he and Zion have played together, they have just looked particularly unstoppable, because you have to deal with that 1-2 punch of Zion being pretty much entirely unstoppable on the inside, and Brandon Ingram being a lethal mid-range shooter, and right now an extremely lethal 3-point shooter, because while he is not taking the highest volume in the world, he is shooting 47% on the season from outside. So I'd say that's pretty good. In fact, it is so good that it is making up for the fact that the third pillar in their offense has been pretty disappointing in terms of his ability to put the ball in the basket. In fact, I do want to add a little bit of a correction to my top 50 list that I put out very recently, but I said that CJ McCollum has been awesome this year. He was really just like pretty good over like a 4-game stretch that I watched, and then since then has been bad. So shooting the ball, he's at like 40% from the field and like 32% from 3, but he's playmaking well, and he's playing much better defense, and you got to assume that that shot is going to return, and even then, once that happens, that means the Pelicans offense is going to be even more scary. Now, the one area that I will be critical of the Pelicans offense, even though of course it is the 5th best offense in the league, has been that their 3-point shooting, both generating those attempts and hitting them, could definitely be a little bit better. I mentioned Brandon Ingram shooting the lights out of the ball, but that is pretty much the only guy on the team doing it, other than Trey Murphy as well, who is an absolute sniper himself. But other than those 2 players, their 3-point shooting leaves a lot of room to be desired. There's some players who are fine shooting the balls, others not so much. Luckily, Zion is so dominant inside the paint, and you combine that with Valanciunas, who's also a very good paint presence, and their offense overall still comes out as a huge positive, even while not being able to hit the 3-ball, which is generally not good for modern day offenses. Right now, they are so good on the interior, they're basically playing it like it's the 90s, and it doesn't matter. I say they're playing it like the 90s, and they're still taking like 33s a game. But for the modern era, 33s a game is not a lot. So, top 5 offense, top 3 defense, some of the best depth in the entire league, and if anything, things could only improve as CJ McCollum's jump shot starts to figure itself out, because I presume that's going to happen. So, they have that going for them. And being top 5 in both offense and defense is generally a pretty good sign that you're going to be a very good team and a contender. It's fairly hard to find teams throughout league history that have been top 5 in both of those categories and were not at least a 50-win team. In fact, I don't know if that's even ever happened. It probably has somewhere along the lines, but teams are weird and lose in other ways. But I digress. The Pelicans are very good on both ends of the ball. So then we get to the question of, does this mean they are contenders? Because while that question might be more clear for a team that's been around for a while, this is a team that's obviously not been around for a while, and we're not even 30 games quite into this season. So it's definitely well within the realm of possibility that a lack of experience ends up being what holds this team back. If they were going to end up being a little bit disappointing in this postseason, that would be the entire reason why. We've also never really seen Zion against a playoff defensive scheme, and I would say like, well, there's no way to stop him, but we've also seen a defensive scheme slow down Giannis for his lack of a jump shot. So I don't know that it's as simple as Zion's really good at getting to the paint in the regular season, therefore there's no way to stop that in the future, because depending on the matchup, that might happen. And then once you have that happen and you don't, as I mentioned earlier, have much of a three-point shooting team, you're not going to beat them on the perimeter. So teams are going to key up on the paint, and you got to hope that Zion can overcome that, and that the Pelicans overall can find ways to generate offense outside of just simply relying on Zion to be a bulldozer going to the basket. All of that said, though, I would definitely lean towards the answer of yes, the Pelicans are contenders. I just wouldn't put them at the top of that list. There are a handful of teams that I would categorize as contenders right now, but I would not have them over the Bucks, the Celtics, the Nuggets, and actually, now I'm thinking about it, so many of these teams have fallen off. I don't even know if, other than those three, if I actually do, the Cavs I'd probably take over the Pelicans. Probably. I don't know. I digress. I think I've said that phrase 3 times in this one. The Pelicans are very good, and I think they're going to be a great playoff team, and they could potentially make it as far as the conference finals. I would personally, the Nuggets to win that series, even though they've been pretty bad defensively. But either way, they definitely have a very real shot. The NBA is kind of wide open right now, so it's kind of hard to say that a team's not going to be successful if they've shown signs of being very good, especially if they're the first seed in their own damn conference. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Pelicans. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.